Stage 1 of a trader, the easy money illusion and the unconscious incompetence trap. Here is the hook you are not expecting. The first wins in this stage are not proof you can trade. They are a sedative that numbs your reflexes while your account quietly bleeds. You step in thinking money will be easy because you have heard the hype, seen the screenshots, watched crypto pump, and felt that sugar rush of possibility. No worries. Right. Markets go up and down. You click, buy, and sell. How hard can it be? That thought is the first landmine. I have seen this play out 1,000 times. And it reads exactly like your own description. You sit in front of the screen with the same blank confidence as someone grabbing a steering wheel for the first time and expecting the car to drive itself. Price flickers. Your heart jumps. You chase one tick, then another, and that is where the real damage begins. Not the losses, the blindness to why they happen. That blindness has a name: unconscious incompetence. You do not know that you do not know. And the market charges a toll for that ignorance every single time the chart breathes. You say price moves up and down, and you do not know what to do with it. So you trade a lot. That sentence alone is the whole autopsy. Trading more is supposed to create control, but it only manufactures noise. Overtrading becomes your fake seatbelt. You flip from buy to sell because each small move mocks you, and each flip spikes your stress while draining your edge, which you do not have yet. It feels like action. It looks like progress, but it is just sweat with no traction. You think you will cut your losses hard, then you hesitate, then you average down, then you get wrecked on a pump and dump you were sure you understood. The problem is not the red candle. The problem is the story you tell yourself about what the next candle owes you. The market does not owe you anything, and the sooner you stop expecting a refund, the sooner you stop bleeding from self-inflicted wounds. You mention cranking up size when it feels sure. That is the siren song of stage 1. Certainty without skill is gasoline near an open flame. Size becomes your shortcut to redemption. You try to fix a string of small wounds with one big swing, the way a desperate player tries to sprint out of quicksand. Sometimes you hit it. You claw back the losses, breathe out, and think the nightmare is over. But that one green spike is not salvation. It is a trap that validates your worst habit. It tells you the button will save you whenever you panic. So you hardwire the wrong lesson. When in doubt, click more and click bigger. From there, your equity curve does not crash. It sinks slowly, a staircase down, because the occasional win keeps you hooked while the baseline keeps slipping. That slow slide is more dangerous than a swift collapse, because it keeps you believing while it strips your capital and your clarity. The driving analogy in your story is accurate but incomplete. You are not just new behind the wheel. You are driving on ice with no brakes, and you keep flooring it because the dashboard looks exciting. You stare at price as if staring creates control. You are mistaking movement for opportunity and clicks for competence. This stage lasts a few months to 1 year for a reason. It takes that long for pain to pierce the illusion. The repetition of the same loop is not random. Buy. Price dips. You flip to sell. Price bounces. You flip again. That whip is not the market punishing you. It is your own lag reacting to what already happened. You are always a step late because your decisions are driven by the last candle's insult, not by a defined process. You are not managing risk. You are managing feelings. And feelings manage you right back. Look at your equity summary. You said it yourself. The line leans down. That downward lean is the only honest mentor in this phase. It shows that sporadic recoveries do not beat accumulated slippage. It's spread. Commissions, hesitation, and revenge flicks. It shows that trade more is just lose slower, disguised as hustle. You think the next increase in size will put you back on top, but increasing size while blind only magnifies the feedback loop that keeps you blind. The car analogy again. Pressing the gas harder does not straighten a crooked wheel. What straightens the wheel is awareness. And stage 1 never starts with awareness. It starts with ego dressed as curiosity. So here is the bitter revelation hiding in your own words. The market is not the problem in this phase. The problem is the invisible belief that clicking faster will close the gap between what you feel and what price is actually doing. If that belief is the engine that drives your first year, what do you think happens when the engine finally runs hot and the dashboard lights start flashing in red? You said this phase usually runs for a few months to 1 year. That timeline is not random luck. It is the market's way of marinating you long enough for the wrong lessons to harden. Stage 1 is not just a lack of skill. It is a training program in reverse, where the teacher is pain and the homework is denial. The first wins act like a warm blanket that covers the holes in your process. You chase because the last candle stung your pride. You flip because the next candle promises relief. You size up because the bigger button feels like power. No worries. Right. Then the account line keeps sagging even when the last trade looked smart. That mismatch between what feels sharp and what results say is the signature of unconscious incompetence. You cannot see your blind spots because they are shaping your seeing. You think you are navigating, but the chart is steering, and you keep thanking the wheel for letting you pretend. The repeated flipping you describe is not a small habit. It is the wiring of an if-then brain that reacts to price like a cat to a laser pointer. If green, then buy. If red, then sell. If it whips, then panic. If it bounces, then chase. Loop it again. This is why the cost stack buries you. Spread, slippage, fees, hesitation, and the stress tax all add up. Every extra click to feel in control extracts a tiny toll that never refunds. One big win here and there does not offset the grind of 1,000 micro leaks. You call it trying harder. The market calls it providing liquidity. The staircase down you mentioned is not bad luck. It is arithmetic, doing what arithmetic does when your behavior feeds the wrong side of expectancy. The car analogy hides another truth. The road you are trying to drive is not a straight highway. It is ice, gravel, and oil, slick in one. And you keep flooring it because speed feels like certainty. You are not just new to the wheel. You are also convinced that motion equals mastery. That belief breeds the size escalation you wrote about. You go heavier when it feels sure, because heavier feels like commitment. But heavier without competence only amplifies the lag between stimulus and reaction. You enter late. Size big. Or get nicked. Flip late. Size big again. Get nicked again. And now the mind spirals. You tell yourself you will cut your losses hard. Then the stop moves a little. Then a little more. Then the candle rips through and you shake your head like the candle has wronged you. The market did not wrong you. It simply punished your attachment to being right in the moment instead of being profitable over time. The cruel part is the recovery trades that work. You describe those too. You dig a hole. Then, one push gets you back to even. And you breathe like someone who just outran a storm. That breath is expensive. It tricks you into thinking you can always outclick the next hole. It cements the idea that size is a fix rather than a risk. It keeps you in the loop long enough for the equity line to sink, while your confidence tells you everything is fine. That is why this stage lasts months, sometimes a full year. Not because you are dumb, not because the market is rigged, but because partial success is the most effective solvent for self-awareness. You keep learning how to survive the mess you make instead of learning how to stop making it. Your phrasing gives away another blind spot. You feel sure. Then you size up. Feeling sure is the exact moment skillful traders get suspicious. In stage 1, it is the moment you turn up the volume. Certainty is a drug, and the dose increases when the account hurts. The market knows this because the market is just other people's reactions aggregated into price. That is why you get wrecked on moves that look obvious afterward. Obvious is not the same as tradable. Obvious is just loud. You are trading volume in your chest, not probabilities on the screen, and you call that intuition. Intuition without data is just memory of recent candles. You wrote that you sit, look at price go up and down, and do not know what to do with it. So you trade a lot. Read that line again. The action is not solving the confusion. It is feeding it. Overtrading becomes the coping mechanism for not having a framework. The market loves coping mechanisms because they are predictable, and predictable behavior is harvestable. That is why the equity curve leans down even when you are not making huge mistakes. The little mistakes are consistent. Consistency scales. Your occasional get it all back spikes only keep you emotionally invested, like a slot machine that pays just enough to keep you dropping coins. You are not being taught to trade. You are being trained to tolerate pain while calling it progress. The transition you hinted at, moving quickly to stage 2, carries a hidden cost. If stage 1 ends only because the pain finally gets loud enough, what mindset do you bring into the next stage? The same need for certainty, now dressed up as caution. The same love for size, now disguised as conviction. The same habit of flipping, now justified as flexibility. If the seed is the same, what harvest do you think grows when the market stops being generous and starts being indifferent? The next layer under that timeline is uglier than most want to admit. Stage 1 does not just run for a few months to 1 year. It sets up a reinforcement engine that keeps a refit, paying you in tiny doses of relief while charging full price in drawdown. Your own words reveal it. Price goes up and down. You do not know what to do. So you trade a lot. That is not indecision. That is a ritual. The ritual looks like control because hands are moving and buttons are clicking. The brain loves rituals because they calm anxiety. The market loves them because they are predictable. You are not chasing profit. You are buying sedation with fees, slippage, and stress. Every flip buys a few seconds of relief and sells a chunk of expectancy. If that reads harsh, good. Harsh is the only language this phase respects. There is another blind spot buried in your description, anchoring to entries. You buy. Price dips. The mind clings to the entry as if the chart owes a return to break even. Then you flip, and suddenly the new anchor replaces the old one, as if the last one never existed. The anchor keeps moving, so your identity keeps moving. And a moving identity cannot manage risk. It can only negotiate with pain. That is why stop, slide, and target stretch. The chart does not break you. The attachment to a number on the screen does. You call that conviction when it goes your way. You call it manipulation when it does not. Either way, the anchor runs the show while you swear the show is about skill. The size escalation you mentioned carries a hidden formula almost nobody in this phase recognizes. When confidence spikes without a tested edge, variance becomes your boss. Variance is indifferent and violent, and it feeds on oversized bets that confuse feeling with probability. You crank size because this one feels sure, not because expectancy shifted. That is how a few green candles post-loss become an excuse to go heavier on the next click. You are not compounding gains. You are compounding error. The occasional winner looks like proof that the approach works. It is not proof. It is the market flashing just enough green to keep you hooked. Random reinforcement does not just trick you, it trains you. The dog gets the treat. The dog repeats the trick, then wonders why the leash keeps tightening. There is also the time frame shuffle, the oldest stage 1 party trick. You enter on a fast chart. It moves against you, and suddenly a slower chart appears to justify breathing room. When it runs, the fast chart returns to declare victory. When it bleeds, an even slower chart arrives to argue for patience. This sliding of time frames is not analysis. It is negotiation with discomfort, dressed up as flexibility. The result is a trade with no birth certificate and no expiration date. Only a growing cost of carry and stress and opportunity. The original plan, if there even was one, dissolves into a fog of what-ifs and maybes, while the account line keeps sketching that same tired staircase down. Your phrasing exposes something else, using the unrealized P&L as a signal. Green on screen equals right. Red on screen equals wrong. So, the decision engine becomes the dollar number floating in the corner, not the structure of the setup. That is why cut your losses hard morphs into wait a little longer the moment red shows up. The metric that should be the scoreboard becomes the steering wheel. And steering by scoreboard guarantees you will always turn after the play is over. Then you accuse the game of being rigged. No worries. Right? Add size next time and the scoreboard will apologize. Until it does not. The most brutal twist is the way fear and hope switch jerseys mid-trade. You feel fear before entry, hope after entry, fear again after a small dip, hope again after a tiny bounce, then despair when the bounce fails by one tick. That dance is not random. It is the direct output of entering without a well-defined invalidation and without a predefined risk unit. And here is the kicker. The market keeps rewarding the dance just enough to make it feel like intuition. So, you keep calling the same number on the roulette wheel and occasionally getting a hit. The win feels like skill. The loss feels like betrayal. The chart never promised loyalty. The chart only promised movement. Even the "I will get it back" spike you wrote about is a trap within the trap. Getting back to even is not a recovery. It is a psychological anchor dressed up as victory. You did not repair the process. You erased the pain. Pain erased is pain postponed. Postponed pain returns with interest. And the interest rate in stage 1 is set by your ability to confuse urgent action with competent action. If the next stage begins with the same anchors, the same time frame shuffle, the same scoreboard steering, and the same size as redemption habit, what do you think happens when the market stops handing out those lucky reprieves and starts charging full price for every sloppy click? The contrast between how you think this phase works and how it actually works is the whole point you keep missing. In your head, price moving up and down equals invitations to act. On the screen, the same motion is just noise until a clear plan turns it into signal. In your head, clicking more equals more control. In reality, clicking more only feeds spread, slippage, and stress while draining attention. Thanks for watching, and we have again. In your head, that early win proves you are built for this. On the screen, that early win proves only that randomness can look like skill just long enough to seduce you. In your head, size equals conviction. In reality, size without tested context equals faster liquidation of patience and capital. The market is not arguing with you. It is simply charging admission every time you trade feelings instead of structure. You frame the timeline as a few months to 1 year before moving on. The naive version treats that span like a rite of passage. Survive it, and you graduate. The harsh version reveals it as a grinder that does not prepare you. It programs you. You come out with deeper reflexes for flipping, heavier attachment to break even, and a stronger belief that the next click will erase the last mistake. In the fantasy, you grow through pain. In the data of your own equity line, you just normalize it. That is why the staircase down keeps tilting the same way, even when you swear the last trade was textbook. The textbook you are reading is not about markets. It is about coping mechanisms. You present scaling up as the moment of clarity. It felt sure, so you went bigger. Naively. That reads like courage. In the mirror of results, it reads like impatience. The real market pays those oversized bets with variance, while you call it destiny. You think you are taking control of risk by swinging heavier. What you are actually doing is letting the last loss dictate the next bet size. That is not conviction. That is bargaining. When the big one works, you call it proof. When it fails by one tick, you call it manipulation. Both labels let you skip the only comparison that matters here: belief versus behavior. Your belief says you learned from the dip. Your behavior repeats the same escalation because the memory of getting it all back still tastes sweet. You labeled the buy then sell, then buy again sequence as confusion. The naive lens treats that as a phase that fades with time. The harsh lens identifies it as lag. You are not deciding. You are reacting. Each decision is a protest against the last candle rather than a plan for the next sequence. That is why you keep entering late and exiting early while declaring you just missed it. Nothing was missed. You arrived exactly on time for the pain you ordered. The market did not bait you. Your need to answer every tick did. You call the flips flexibility. The ledger calls them indecision with fees. You also wrap this stage in the driving analogy, like a first time behind the wheel. Naively. That suggests a linear learning curve. Practice, and it smooths out. In reality, the road here changes surface every minute while you keep chasing a feeling of smoothness that never arrives. You do not build respect for friction. You build contempt for hesitation. That contempt breeds the very hesitation you hate. Then the timeline stretches. The patience thins. And the voice in your head whispers that a strategy upgrade in the next stage will fix what discipline failed to fix here. But how does a new label change a mind still convinced that more action equals more edge? Even the occasional recovery you celebrate has two faces. Naively, it means the method is fine and you just need more reps. In reality, it is a coin toss that happened to land in your favor after a string of bad flips. You are not seeing that because the relief of green on the screen blinds you to the structure that delivered it. The relief is real. The structure is not. This is the hidden bill of stage 1. Every dose of relief without process makes the next hit more necessary and the drawdown more likely. You think you are proving resilience. You are proving dependence. You say you will leave this phase soon. What exactly are you leaving if the beliefs you carry forward are the same ones that kept you spinning here? Part 4, roughly 630 words, analysis density, around 88%. There is an exit hidden inside the mess you described, and it does not look like a new indicator or a fresh set of lines. It looks like changing what the screen means to you. In stage 1, the chart is a mirror for your feelings. An alternative is treating the screen like a contract. A contract does not care if you are bored or hyped. It cares about terms. When the screen becomes terms instead of comfort, the ritual of clicking for relief loses its shine, because relief is not in the contract. Results are. Start with the part you kept repeating without naming it, identity welded to entry. A different lens sees the entry as a hypothesis, not a marriage. The number you click is not you. It is a test. If it fails the test ends. No drama. No negotiation. You called it flipping. The alternative is a clean invalidation that turns a guess into data. Data is colder than hope, and cold is exactly what burns through the sedation loop you built with overtrading. When the entry is a test instead of a confession, the urge to chase redemption with size loses its oxygen. That brings the scoreboard steering under a brighter light. In your phase, green equals right and red equals wrong. So the floating dollar number takes the wheel. A cleaner perspective reads P and L as the receipt, not the map. The map is the structure that justified the test in the first place. When the receipt arrives, it tells you whether the hypothesis paid. It does not tell you what to do next. The next move comes from the contract you set before the trade existed. You wanted cut your losses hard to mean courage. A contract makes it mean closure. Different planet. You leaned on time frame shuffles to negotiate with discomfort. Another approach treats time as a jurisdiction. The trade is born in one court and judged in the same court. If the case does not fit in that court, the case does not get filed. That sounds rigid until you notice how much clarity it buys. Jurisdiction shuts down the slippery slope where a scalp transforms into an investment because the candle hurt your feelings. When time has a contract, patience is not a mood. It is an agreed cost of doing business. Size, in your telling, is the firefighter you call when the house is already smoking. The quieter lens sees size as an amplifier of clarity, not a rescue squad. Clarity is defined before the click, not after the hit. If the test is clean, the invalidation is defined, and the jurisdiction is set. Size simply scales the contract. If any of those are fuzzy, size stays quiet. You do not need a new rule to make that happen. You just need to notice that size used as redemption kept drawing the same staircase down on your equity. The pattern already told you the truth. The itch to click because price moved is the engine of stage 1. N, alternative engine values inaction as a position. Silence is not absence. Silence is a trade with zero spread and zero slippage that preserves focus for when the contract actually appears. That sounds romantic until you look at your own words. Trading a lot never fixed confusion. It fed it. If clicking created calm, the staircase would tilt up. It did not. Calm that comes from inactivity is not cowardice. It is conservation. Even the early wins that sedated you look different under this lens. Instead of proof of talent, they become proof that randomness pays sometimes, which means they are terrible teachers and great temptations. Seeing them that way removes their halo. If a win arrives inside the contract, it is a validated edge sample. If it lands outside the contract, it is sugar. Sugar tastes good and makes you slow. Your story shows how much you love the taste. A different taste builds speed by starving the need to feel right every 10 minutes. There is also a shift in what progress means. In stage 1, progress was getting back to even after a spiral. Under the contract lens, progress is fewer negotiations with pain and more repetitions of clean tests, regardless of outcome. Winning stops meaning heroics and starts meaning discipline repeated without applause. That is not motivational fluff. It is the only way the equity line stops whispering the same insult. You wanted resilience to mean taking bigger hits and staying on your feet. The market's version is smaller hits taken on your terms and less often. None of this asks for a personality transplant. It asks for a different scoreboard. Every behavior you described already drew its own map to an exit. You hated flipping because it felt weak. A contract makes flipping irrelevant because there is nothing to flip from. The test ended where it said it would. You hated being late because the last candle mocked you. A contract removes the mockery because the plan is time-stamped before the tick. You hated needing size to feel powerful. A contract makes size a detail. When power stops living in size, it has to live in clarity. And clarity does not spike your adrenaline. It saves it. So if the escape route is not a new tool, but a new contract with the same screen, and if the contract drains the drama, you have been calling intuition. What happens to the identity you built on surviving chaos, when chaos stops getting invited to every single trade? You asked what happens to the identity built on surviving chaos when chaos stops getting an invite. Here is the uncomfortable harmony. The identity dissolves. And with it goes the main reason stage 1 kept you pacing in circles. You described a phase fueled by boredom, spikes of certainty, frantic flips, and size used like a fire extinguisher. That identity thrives on emergencies. When the screen becomes a contract instead of a mirror, emergencies dry up. No siren, no cape, no quick redemption arc. The same up and down action you once treated as personal becomes background noise until the terms are met. That shift is not heroic. It is disenchanted. The romance with volatility loses its perfume. You stop needing the chart to validate your mood because your terms already did that before price even moved. This is where your timeline quietly rearranges itself. You said this stretch runs a few months to 1 year. Then comes the next stage. That is the naive calendar. The harsher calendar says the phase ends the moment your behavior no longer feeds the ritual you outlined. Not the moment you feel ready. Not the moment of a big win. Not the moment a new strategy slides in with shiny rules. It ends when entries become tests. Invalidations become closures. Size becomes amplification instead of redemption. And silence becomes a paid position instead of a threat. When those pieces click, the duration shrinks because the reinforcement loop stops getting fed. The market is no longer a casino that occasionally forgives you. It is a venue where your terms either get met or they do not. No worries. Right. That phrase loses its sarcasm because there is nothing left to wink about. Look back at your own words and see how every pain point had a built-in antidote that did not care about motivation. Overtrading was a coping routine for not knowing what to do with price. A contract does not have a slot for coping. Flipping was a reaction to being mocked by the last candle. A contract does not negotiate with the last candle. Sizing up on a sure feeling was bargaining with fate. A contract does not bargain. It quantifies. The equity line sloping down was the silent feedback you kept trying to outrun. A contract removes the sprint because there is nowhere to run. You either repeated clean tests or you did not. The line will report either way. The identity piece matters because stage 1 seduces you into believing that survival is skill. You survived the whip. You survived the loss. You survived the tilt. In that frame, resilience becomes the ability to take larger punches. That is why you reached for bigger size the moment belief felt loud. Under the contract lens, resilience flips its jersey. It becomes the ability to take smaller punches, less often, by ending tests at the agreed boundary and refusing to romanticize the rescue. You still bleed, but the blood loss is measured and brief. You still act, but the action is scheduled by terms, not triggered by insults. You still feel fear and hope, but neither gets voting rights. When that becomes normal, the old identity has nothing left to feed on. It starves, and with it goes the staircase down that kept drawing the same tired slope. Your story hinted at a transition to the next stage, as if time alone unlocks it. Time is a poor locksmith. Behavior is better. If the next stage inherits the same anchors, the same scoreboard steering, the same time frame shuffle, and the same size as redemption habit, You just rebrand Stage 1 with a fancier label. But when the contract disenchants the screen, the next stage is not a promotion. It is a quieter room with fewer levers to pull and fewer excuses to reach for. The energy you spent negotiating with pain shifts into running the same simple terms again and again. Boredom becomes a feature. Predictability stops being an insult. Relief no longer comes from green spikes. It comes from seeing the same clean test executed without drama. Win or lose. Over and over until the equity line tells a different story without needing you to narrate it. So, what happens to the identity that lived for chaos? It fades the way bad habits fade, not with fireworks, but with lack of oxygen. You do not beat it in a duel. You stop feeding it and let it blink out. Then the chart is just a chart, not a stage for redemption. And that is the sharp edge you kept circling without touching. When the screen is a contract, Stage 1 ends not with a victory lap, but with a shrug. If this hit home, share it with your buddies who keep chasing the next redemption. Click. Subscribe to Mind Over Markets so you do not miss these razor-sharp breakdowns that cut through the noise and leave only the terms that pay.